Hey everybody, welcome to the videos for my final thoughts for week 5 of the NFL season over on DraftKings. This is a more finalized and polished version of the first look I do earlier in the week. Then I'll have my lineup building and core plays video ready to go tomorrow if you do want to check those out. But if you do find this specific video helpful in any way possible, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to take that one step further, become an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. You get access into the entire spreadsheet, which is all color-coded nicely, all the data you'd ever need, so it's quite easy to follow. Projections, ownership projections, optimizers, cheat sheets, Discord community, all that fun stuff. Link can be found down below. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm sure most of you know this by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150th max contest, or salary cap restrictions, or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you're new signing over there, you can use code CPEN to get a free money bonus. That's an instant deposit match up to $100, so it's free money. Why not use it to your advantage when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. But I think that'll be it for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, we'll start with the quarterback position. I'm going to be honest, I am more than likely spending down here, especially if it's cash games, because I like a lot of expensive running backs. I love Derrick Henry, I love Devontae Adams, a wide receiver, and a couple of other guys. So I'm going to have to find some savings somewhere. I think quarterback position is typically a good way to do it. If you have the money for Kyler, though, I think he's a fine tournament play. There's not many games that feature over 50-point over-unders on this slate, but this one's close to it at 49. 4-point spread. The 49ers have actually not been that great versus quarterbacks so far this season, ranking 26, 18th DVA versus the pass. Despite only allowing 234 passing yards per game, they're allowing nearly half a rushing touchdown and over 30 rushing yards per game, which I guess does suit Kyler Murray well. He's been one of the best quarterbacks in football this season. Isn't really killing it yardage-wise on the ground, but he is getting close to 30 rushing yards per game, which is almost a built-in passing touchdown floor, close to a rushing touchdown, and he's been killing it through the air, over 300 passing yards per game so far. So if you have the money for Kyler in tournaments, great. If not, it's not the end of the world. There's some other solid quarterbacks that are a lot cheaper than Kyler this weekend, like Dak Prescott. He's over $1,000 cheaper, below $7,000. Gets a good matchup here versus the Giants. This is the game that features the highest over-under on the slate currently at 52. 7-point spread in the Cowboys' favor. They're playing at home at team total close to 30, which I believe is the highest on the entire slate here. And Dak has been very good this year. He's been quite efficient, not throwing the ball as much as he was last year in a small sample size, but 2.5 passing touchdowns per game thus far. He's got great weapons to get the ball to, and CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Dalton Schultz has been very good the past couple of weeks. Even Zeke out of the backfield. Tony Pollard's been great in the ground, so good-looking offense with not that great of a defense. And plus, Daniel Jones has been good on the Giants side of the ball here, so if they can keep this game close, we could definitely have a shootout despite it being a 7-point spread. So I think Dak Prescott at that price point definitely is going to be in play. Plus, we like his pass-catching options, so if we like his pass-catching options, we gotta like the quarterback getting them the ball. Kirk Cousins, $6,500. I am more interested in the run game here, but if Dalvin Cook happens to be, which he has not been practicing, although it sounds like he's still trending towards playing, but we'll have to wait and see. But if he's out, they might rely on the passing game a little bit more. And Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, they are in a great spot here versus Detroit, one of, if not the worst defense in all of the NFL. They are 30th DVA versus the pass right now, despite being only 14th in points allowed to the quarterback position. But I think it's going to get a lot worse as the season progresses. It's just so easy to run on these guys. So that's what teams will do, but you can definitely pass on Detroit here. And Cousins at this price point, I think he's a good tournament play. Would not go there in cash games. I just don't see the need to go with him in cash games because the floor is a little bit lower than guys like Daniel Jones and Trey Lance. But I think in tournaments, I mean, if him and Justin Jefferson hook up for a couple touchdowns and Kirk Cousins gets over 300 passing yards, which is definitely possible, I think it's a very good GPP stack this weekend. Then dropping down to probably your 2 cash game quarterbacks if you're not using Dak Prescott. It's Daniel Jones and Trey Lance. Daniel Jones is $6,000. Like if Jimmy Garoppolo happens to be playing, obviously we can cross Trey Lance off and just play Daniel Jones, but he's been very good this year, and he's running the ball a lot. Like he quietly is averaging nearly 50 rushing yards per game and half a rushing touchdown, which is a really nice floor, and close to 300 passing yards per game. Just had 30 points last week versus New Orleans. It's a good spot here versus Dallas, 52-point over-under. They're 7-point dogs on the road, so they should be throwing the ball a lot. So this is actually a pretty good spot for Daniel Jones, and I really think in cash games it comes down between him or Trey Lance, and if Trey Lance happens to not be the starting quarterback, just makes your decision easier. Trey Lance, $5,700. Jimmy G has not yet practiced this week. It looks like he's going to be out, and if that's the case, $5,700. Really hard to pass up for a quarterback that has large rushing upside. And plus, he had around 27 fantasy points and a half last week with a 76-yard touchdown to Deebo Samuel. Had close to 40, 50 rushing yards on the ground. So Trey Lance at that price point, good matchup versus Arizona. Should be a decently high-scoring game, 4-point spread. He currently grades out as the best point per dollar quarterback on the entire slate for me, with Daniel Jones being right behind him. And moving on to the running back position, there's several ways to go, whether you want to spend up, save some money, or go right in the middle. Well, let's start top with the volume king, Derrick Henry at $9,000, and he's a real tough fade this week. and what should be a positive game script versus a very weak defense in Jacksonville. They've won, one game in like the past 2 years. It's been very ugly. Defense is not very good. And I mean, if we're just going to get 30-plus touches every single week at Derrick Henry, we're going to keep plugging him in, especially in cash games, because it's really easy to fit him in. I'm currently predicting him to be the highest owned player on the entire slate. I'm not sure anyone can really argue with that. I just don't see why he wouldn't be. He's a 4.5-point favorite here, nearly a 27-point implied team total, getting over 28 carries per game, nearly 130 rushing yards, rushing touchdown per game on 4.5 yards per carry. And he's slightly involved in the passing game. He only saw 2 targets last week, but he still has a 10% target share in the season, 3.5 targets per game, and 31 receiving yards. In Jacksonville on the season, they're 14th DVO versus the run, 19th versus running backs, allowing over a rushing touchdown per game. And these numbers are going to look a lot worse, I think, after Derrick Henry is done with them. So I know he's very expensive at $9,000, but you can easily fit him in this weekend because there's a lot of good value plays on this slate. Dropping down to CMC here, $8,700, looking like he's going to be good to go this weekend. And he said he feels really good, and definitely there's a good chance that he can play. So we're at CMC below $9,000. I will take that each and every single day. And it looks like Dalvin Cook is trending in the wrong direction this week. He's not yet practiced, although the rumors are that he's still going to play. But if CMC is in, he seems a lot more safer than Dalvin Cook at this point of the week. Plus, you can get well over 30 total touches out of Christian McCaffrey, at least 30 total opportunities, because he's going to get the targets every single week. He's going to get 20-plus carries on the ground. If we look at his numbers right now, they're a bit skewed because he left that game early on, so he's only averaging 17 rushing attempts per game and 5.5 targets. But if you take that third game out of the equation, he had 24 rushing attempts in week 2 on 6 targets and 21 rushing attempts in week 1 on 9 targets. It's going to be pretty hard to pass that up. Plus, the Eagles haven't been great versus running backs so far. 28 DVO versus the run and 27th versus running backs, allowing 6 receptions per game, which is Christian McCaffrey's bread and butter. So as long as we get word that he's a full-on go, I love that price a lot. Now, I would really like to try to get Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey together in cash games if possible, although I do realize that's eating up a chunk of your salary. Dalvin Cook, $8,400. I'm not sure where I'm going to stand on Dalvin Cook as of right now. If he happens to be in, I think he's an interesting play. I just worry about the workload because they have Alexander Madison, so I'm not exactly sure if they're going to want to push it too much. Just know if Dalvin Cook is not playing, Alexander Madison pretty much becomes the best play on the slate at $5,500 versus Detroit. 10-point favorite at home, pretty high implied team total here. They're sitting at 29.5 currently, which is tied for the Cowboys at the highest. So I would love to play Alexander Madison if Dalvin Cook happens to be out. They are currently 29th versus running backs and 30th TVA versus the run. So just keep that in mind. Dalvin Cook is in. I mean, I think he's slightly riskier than I thought he would be earlier in the week. I would probably just lean towards Christian McCaffrey, but we'll have to wait and see on Sunday morning or hopefully Saturday night, get some clarity on what's going to happen in Minnesota. Zeke Elliott, $7,000. Just seems a bit too cheap, in my opinion. He's had a few good weeks in a row. 7-point favorite at home, 29.5 implied team total here. Getting 16 carries per game on the ground, close to 90 rushing yards, rushing touchdown, 5.3 yards per carry. Not too involved in the passing game, only a 6% target share in the season. But pretty good spot, though, as the Giants are 26th DVO versus the run and 20th versus running backs, and allowing over 50 receiving yards per game to the position. So Zeke firmly in play if you are fading the Dallas passing attack. Najee Harris at $6,900. He's been terrible on the ground this year, and this is a not very good matchup versus the Denver Broncos. But the reason we are playing Najee Harris is because what he's doing in the passing game right now didn't follow up his 19-target game with 19 targets again, but he's still averaging 8.5 targets per game so far, 6.5 catches on a 20% target share with a 30% weighted opportunity share. So if you're playing Najee Harris, you're just hoping for a bunch of dump-offs, which is pretty much the only thing Big Ben can do these days. Yes, he had that long touchdown to Deontay Johnson, but he just looks like a wounded duck out there. And really the only thing you can do is just dump it off to Najee Harris at this point. Like I said, the matchup's terrible. Denver's allowing the least points per game to running back so far, 19 versus the run, only 50 rushing yards per game, but you are strictly playing Najee just for his pass-catching ability. DeAndre Swift, $6,100, kind of in the same boat as Najee, as he's not really being used on the ground too much, only 10 rushing attempts per game and 34 rushing yards. But on the season, he's heavily involved in the passing game, 7 targets per game, close to 6 catches, and over an 18.5% target share. So kind of in a similar boat to Najee Harris, although he's in a much softer matchup versus Minnesota, as they are 24th versus running backs this season and 23rd DVO versus the run. James Robinson, $6,000. He excelled with Carlos Hyde being out last week. He's going to be back, but I still think James Robinson should have a larger workload than normal. Plus, he's always been the RB1 on this team. And this is a pretty soft matchup versus Tennessee. Now, they are projected dogs here, and I already like Derrick Henry, so a lot of people don't usually like stacking the game up with running backs, but he's the pass-catching running back on this team, so it still makes sense correlation-wise. And Leonard Fournette, Uncle Lenny, $5,200. I could see him being quite popular this week, and my projections personally love him. Love him more than I thought he would this week, but Miami's been terrible on the ground this year. He's the main guy in this backfield. Ronald Jones is pretty much an afterthought. Giovanni Bernard is still questionable. He was out last week, but Leonard Fournette saw 20 carries on the ground last week, and Miami is currently 30th versus running backs and 20th DFS versus the run, and allowing 6.5 catches per game, and he's also the main pass catching running back. So Fournette, definitely think he's in play at only $5,200 as a 10-point favorite at home with a 29-point implied team total. Kind of feel like he's going to find the end zone in this game. And moving on to the wide receiver position, I try to keep this simple. It just really depends on what quarterback you're using or what game stacks you're going with. Like if you're using Trey Lance, you can play him naked, but if you want to pair him up with Deebo Samuel, that's probably a good idea for game stacks and tournaments. If you're using Dak Prescott, try to get some CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper in. If you're using Daniel Jones, you can pair him with Sterling Shepard, although he looks a little bit iffy this week. He still hasn't really been practicing, and it's now Friday morning, so hopefully we can get some positive news and practice out of there, but we're still kind of waiting on that news. But just to kind of go through this swiftly, Davante Adams, if you're playing cash games this week, you're probably going to want Davante Adams in. I realized he had a down week last week versus Pittsburgh, but it's only a 3-point spread here versus the Bengals. He's still getting over 11 targets per game at 36% target share, which is second in the league, only behind Brandon Cooks, 38% market share of the team's air yards. I don't think you guys need me to tell you that Davante Adams is a good football player. Justin Jefferson, obviously an elite spot here versus the Lions. If you're using Kirk Cousins, get one of his pass-catching options in, whether it be Jefferson or Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen's a lot cheaper, but Jefferson, definitely I would prefer. DJ Moore has a big price hike here, nearly $1,000 after blowing up last week versus Dallas, about 34, 36 fantasy points. I wouldn't say the matchup is as soft here, but they did just allow Tyreek Hill to have nearly 50 DraftKings points versus them last week, and he's been great this year. About a 31% target share, 10.5 targets per game, nearly a touchdown per game. So DJ Moore firmly on my radar, although probably more of a tournament play just because of the price hike, and I'd rather get to Davante Adams. Deebo Samuel has been crushing it this year. Looks like Trey Lance will be his quarterback, but they did connect on a 76-yard touchdown last week, so I guess the connection is there. But on the season, 32% target share, 10.5 targets per game. He is absolutely blowing up this season. Chris Godwin seems too cheap for his role in this offense. Pretty soft spot here versus Miami. I will say they're worse versus the run than they are versus the pass, but $6,300 just seems like a really good price point. CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper. CeeDee Lamb has had 2 really bad weeks in a row, but this should be a nice bounce back week here versus the Giants. Same goes for Amari Cooper, although he did get into the end zone last week on a nice 35-yard touchdown, but both these guys are way too cheap, and if you're using Dak Prescott, I would get some of his pass-catching options in. It could be both, it could be one, but I would definitely try to get at least one of them in. Jacoby Myers is a fine cash game target this week, only $5,600. It's a great spot versus Houston, one of the worst defenses in the NFL. And while Myers does not score touchdowns, he has not scored a touchdown in his NFL career, he still has a 26% target share in the season on 10 targets per game and nearly 7 catches, so I think he's just a safe volume play in a really good matchup. Sterling Shepard, I would say he's very questionable for this game. I believe he was spotted in full pads at practice, but he was not participating, so hopefully we get some positive news on Friday, which hopefully we'll get the practice report once I'm done recording, so hopefully he's not rolled out or anything. But if he's in, I mean, on the year, he's got a 21% target share, great spot versus Dallas. They've been terrible versus wide receivers this year, ranking 30th versus position. They're also 30th versus quarterback, so if you're using Daniel Jones, you can play him naked because of the rushing upside, but I would like to get a pass-catching option, and Sterling Shepard would definitely be my favorite. Laviska Shenault, great matchup here versus Tennessee. They're allowing the second most points per game to the position, over 52 DraftKings points per game, and over 230 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns just to wide receivers. That's not everybody. That's just to wide receivers. So Shenault with no DJ Shark, definitely a very good spot here. Had a nice week last week. Then Curtis Samuel, $3,000. Another guy that's very iffy to play. He's been questionable all week. We're not sure if he's going to be good to go. He's one of the best value plays on the slate. Like as of right now, projecting him in, I have him projected for around 10 fantasy points, which at $3,000 is really, really good. He really opens up a lot on this slate. Like if you go cheap quarterback and you go Curtis Samuel and a cheap tight end, you can pretty much play whoever the heck you want on this slate. So I'm hoping Curtis Samuel is good to go. But he did have 4 targets last week, caught 4 of them for 19 yards. Wasn't anything spectacular, but he did play a limited amount of snaps. But if he's in, $3,000 is really hard to pass up in cash games. Moving on to the tight end position, usually a boring one to talk about. You got 2 studs up top, Darren Waller, George Kittle. Darren Waller, I mean, volume pretty much each and every single week. One of the best tight ends in football. If you had the money for him, great. Don't really see myself spinning up for tight end this weekend, but you can never really go wrong with Darren Waller. And is near 10 targets per game on a 25% target share, which is amazing numbers for a tight end. George Kittle, $5,600. If you're using Trey Lance, he's a nice pairing option with them. I wouldn't say he's been amazing this year, but he's still averaging 7 targets per game on a 22% target share. Dalton Schultz, $4,400. He's been really good the past couple weeks. He's been scoring touchdowns in bunches. At some point, it'll probably stop, but this is a good matchup versus the Giants. Actually, both these teams in this game have struggled versus the tight end position. The Giants are 28th and 24th DVA versus the pass, allowing over 17 DraftKings points per game. And the Cowboys are allowing 16.5 DraftKings points per game, and they're 25th versus position. So Evan Ingram, Dalton Schultz. Evan Ingram, especially if the wide receivers are out once again, because Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton are still very questionable for this game. If they're out, Ingram's going to get the volume. He's probably not going to do much with it, but he'll be on the field, and he's going to get targets. We'll just see if he finds the end zone, because on the season, 5 targets per game, 3.5 catches, and 24 receiving yards. Has not found the end zone yet. Then Ricky Seals-Jones, $2,500. No Logan Thomas this weekend, so he should step into the tight end 1 role. And with Logan Thomas going down last week, he played on 92% of the snaps and saw 4 targets, which, hey, good enough for me at the min price at $2,500. He really opens things up. So RSJ here is definitely on my radar versus New Orleans. And as far as defenses goes, you guys know how I feel. I typically play the cheapest defense I can possible. So in cash games, I am more than likely playing the Washington football team defense at $2,300. They should be good for several points here. Not really expecting a lot, but at $2,300, as long as they don't go negative, I guess I'll be happy. Patriots defense versus Houston, obviously the top projection play, only 39.5 over under here, 8.5 point favorite, 15.5 implied team total against. If you have the money for them, great, but do not waste $5,000 on a defense this weekend. Vikings versus Detroit, 10 point favorites at home. I think that makes plenty of sense. The Raiders at home, 5.5 point favorites versus the Bears. Not too scared of their offense, especially with no David Montgomery. And then obviously Justin Fields was a mess versus Cleveland. Looked a little bit better versus Detroit. Raiders defense, not terrible, not great, kind of somewhere in the middle, but I think they can get some pressure on Fields and make him make some poor decisions. And I already talked about Washington there, but I'll probably just play some cheap defenses. You could look at the Eagles. They're somewhat viable. I think they're $2,200 or 24, but just throw in whoever fits, to be honest. But with that being said, I think that'll be pretty much it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, you can official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by Prize Picks. There's you versus projections. And as of right now, if you're new signing up there, you can get a free money bonus up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. It's free money. Just use it to your advantage. I think it'll be it. I will stop rambling. I'll see you guys in the next video tomorrow.